Alumni from the University of the Free State make their mark locally and internationally. The UFS is committed to keeping our alumni informed, engaged, and connected with each other and their alma mater. Here are some highlights of what happened in 2021.
But the university's role really is effectively to produce global citizens that are critical thinkers, people that can adapt.
Thank you so much for the welcome back, to come back home to the UFS family.
Today, 30 years ago, it was our graduation ceremony.
We look forward to another prosperous year. Our aim is to connect with you, recognize and celebrate your achievements, and grow our UFS alumni community through quality, impact, and care.
Do you still remember running on this track? This is one of the many places at the University of the Free State where memories were made and where lifelong friendships were formed.
Perhaps you remember the try you scored in the corner and the sound of the crowd cheering you on. Or maybe making that tackle that your teammates still talk about till this day.
Maybe this is where it all started for you, or you became part of a special family. Whether you were a star or just enjoyed yourself with friends.
Sport often unites people like nothing else does. And as we know, only a Corpsey knows the power. We want to celebrate the UFS camaraderie, the unique cultures and the environment across all sporting codes. And that's what makes us Corpsies.
To acknowledge those that came before us by looking at their achievements, and to recognize those that are currently flying the UFS flag.
If you have a fond memory, want to share a story, or even get in touch with your teammates of yesteryear, become part of the UFS alumni sporting community.
The UFS Sporting Legends Project does exactly that, and we want to connect with you. Send us an email to alumni@ufs.ac.za with your details, info, and pics, or even some old photos of days gone by. We want to celebrate you as part of our UFS legacy.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. In terms of the statute of the University of the Free State and as President of the Convocation, I welcome you all to the general meeting of the Convocation. As is stipulated in the Constitution of the Convocation, we are required to hold a general meeting at least every 2 years. It is our pleasure to have you here today to provide you with some feedback from the Executive Committee of our business from the start of our term. For the first time, we are also streaming this event live to Convocation members who cannot attend in person. It is also our pleasure to provide an opportunity to the Rector and Vice-Chancellor to share some thoughts with the Convocation members. I therefore also extend a special word of welcome to the Rector and Vice-Chancellor, Professor Francis Peterson, to the Registrar, Mr. Nikile Nsababa, and the Deputy Registrar of Governance, Mrs. Elna van Plitzen, for attending this meeting. Barely 9 days after the death of Mikhail Sergeyevich Gorbachev, a Nobel laureate, and the last president of the Soviet Union, the world has learned of the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II on the 8th of September. Her late Majesty's links with South Africa are well known. From the time of her devotion on her 21st birthday in 1947 in Cape Town, to being the Queen of South Africa from the 6th of February 1952 to the 31st of May 1961. After South Africa was once again readmitted to the Commonwealth, her formal ties to our country were once again strengthened, and the cordial relationship that she had with our late President Nelson Mandela is also well known. Many of our university students are from Commonwealth countries, and many of our alumni reside in countries where she was the Queen, in the UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. On behalf of the Convocation of the University of the Free State, we convey our condolences to His Majesty King Charles III, to the royal family, and to the entire British people. We bow our heads in homage and tribute to remember the life of a remarkable lady who have touched the lives of uncountable people during her reign and her lifetime. May Her Majesty's soul rest in eternal peace. You may rise for a moment of silence and reflection. Thank you. You may sit down. Ladies and gentlemen, first on our program, we would like to introduce our Rector and Vice-Chancellor, Professor Francis Peterson. He will share some of his views with our convocation members, and I'll now introduce Professor Peterson.
Dr. Peter de Tooy, President of the Convocation, Mr. Lefu Mokoena, the Deputy President of the Convocation, Mr. Nkile Nsimbaba, our Registrar, Ms. Elna van Pletsen, the Deputy Registrar, and then to all members of the Convocation, good morning. Those that are present here in the auditorium, as well as those that are linked in or connected online. So, the way that I'm going to do a little bit of my talk is really reflecting on the state of the University of the Free State. And I can't recall when last we have an AGM, but I'm going to try to provide a context probably over the last 3, 4, 5 years where we were and where we came from, but primarily focus on last year, 2021, probably feeding from 2020 through to 2021 up to now, which is around COVID-19 and how the institution have managed, and then I'm gonna talk a little about the core activity of the university, the core mandate of the university, which is teaching and learning, research and internationalization, engaged scholarship, and then the operations that really support the academic project. And then I'm going to end off by give you a glimpse of our views going forward into the next couple of years. So that's going to be the sort of the frame or the layout of my talk. Now, because we haven't had an AGM for some time, I want to just remind all members of the Convocation that the University of the Free State this year is 118 years old, 118 years old. We have 42,000 students, that's both undergraduate and postgraduate students. We operating on 3 campuses, the Bloemfontein campus, where we have the physical presentation this morning, but we also have the Qaqwa campus and also the South campus. We've got roughly about 5,500 staff, and those staff include permanent staff, academic staff, support staff, part-time staff, and maybe in this context, I want to just indicate to members of the Convocation that we, as the University of the Free State, in November last year, Council has approved the insourcing of outsourced workers or contract workers that was in the past part of the university, but when the university decided to focus more on their core mandate, they outsourced some of those functions. And what we did was to insource those workers again, and we do that in a phase-in approach or phased approach. So beginning of this year up until June, we already insourced probably about 30, 40 of the workers, and then there's a second round that's happening between now and June next year, and then the final round will be from there till the end of next year. So that is the way, and what I've heard, I will be able to meet with them in about 2 weeks' time, 2 to 3 weeks' time, is an excitement under the outsourced workers to be part of the family that they were part of, but now they part again, in essence, of the University of the Free State family. Now, the university is driven by a vision, and our vision, as most of you would have read on our website, in our communication, is that we strive to be a research-led university. And research-led means, from my definition, that there is parity between the three functions of what we offer as university. Parity between learning and teaching, between research and internationalization, and engaged scholarship. And that they should have the ability, those three functions, should have the ability to interact with one another, to strengthen one another, to enhance one another. So teaching and learning should inform research, research should inform teaching and learning, and engaged scholarship. So it shouldn't be seen as three discrete functions. And that is the research-led nature. Now, to do that, and yesterday I addressed the launch of the Center for Graduate Support. It was the former postgraduate school. And at that function, I said that what we need to do is to ensure that we strengthen the capability and the capacity in those functions for them to be able to engage in an equitable manner. And I was obviously yesterday just talking from a research and internationalization perspective. So we are a research-led university. We're student-centered. So the student is in the center of our business processes, whether it's undergraduate or postgraduate. And then we also are regionally engaged. Regionally engaged in Bloemfontein, in the Free State Province, in South Africa, on the continent. And that is when we're talking about regionally engaged. It's not only the immediate surroundings. We have got sort of concentric circles that also interface and interact with one another, was regionally engaged. So research-led, student-centered, regionally engaged. And then we build in our vision a high focus on development, so that we are in the process of development. And that's transformative action. And then we also focus quite hard and heavily, with intent, intentionally, on social justice. So those are, in fact, value propositions. And hopefully, when we apply that, we would produce a globally comparative knowledge and globally comparative graduates. And I think members of the Convocation, because we got over 140,000 members of Convocation in all parts of the globe, is really a testimony of our reach as a university, not only in the region around Bloemfontein, but in the global context. So that's our vision. But in the last 5 years, and I will call it 5 years because that is when I started. It's not that the Convocation hasn't met before that, but just to provide a little bit of context, and then I will then focus more on the COVID navigation and the year last year. But as we tackle and try to operationalize the vision that I've just articulated, we developed a framework for us, a framework of guidance, so to speak, the North Star that we wanted to go to. And there were about 5 areas that encapsulate or embedded that framework, the framework of guidance. We early in 2017, it's actually early in 2017. We started that before I just arrived, and we implemented towards the end of 2017, 2018, was the formation of the Integrated Transformation Plan. Now again, not for this forum, I'm not going to go into detail. Suffice to say that that Integrated Transformation Plan was to emphasize the whole issue of social justice as we articulate as a university. We then had a second document, which was our strategy, built from the Integrated Transformation Plan, and the strategy was from 2018 to 2022, the year that we're in today. And the focus of that strategy, again, is a very detailed document, very highly consultative document, is the focus on that is to enhance the scope of transformation. And transformation in the broader sense. So how does teaching and learning transform the institution through teaching and learning? Research and innovation, internationalization, our policies. So it's a much more holistic approach when we look at transformation through the lens of our strategy 2018 to 2022. We also had a project or series of projects, in fact 7 of them, which we called the Vice Chancellor Strategic Projects. And the focus of the Vice Chancellor Strategic Projects was to create a high-performance institution, a institution there where the vibrancy of engagement, vibrancy of output, vibrancy of producing the best of your ability, and I often say to all of our staff, both academic and support staff, that to be able to do what you need to do and what you are doing, you need to be on the top of your game. And there were 7 different initiatives to guide us through that. Then we created a university risk management committee. We did have a risk management committee, but we transformed the committee to really understand what risk philosophy is about. So when we're talking about risk, how do we manage risk, practice risk, look at risk, to be able to deliver our strategy? And not purely to say, well, this is a low probability or a high probability, a low frequency to happen, or a high frequency that specific event will happen, is really to talk through and understand what it actually means. And it took us about 1.5 years, almost 2 years, for the executive in the senior leadership group, where I could say that this group understand what risk is about and what risk philosophy is about. And that obviously is now cascading right through the organization. So for me, it was embedding risk as a critical tool to manage your strategy and the execution thereof. And then the final framework or a component of the framework was focusing on institutional culture. We formed an institutional multi-stakeholder group representing students, staff, alumni, members of council, to be able to get a multi-stakeholder group. And I said that group is a group where we take our gloves off and we talk as it is, because it's a safe space. It's things that really impact the progression of a very inclusive, belonging culture within the University of the Free State. So that is just what has happened from 2017 up till now. And as you could hear from the strategy, our strategy would finish the end of this year, and my final remarks after my presentation will be say, well, what the next steps would be. Now, let me then zoom into the year that I think the year under reflection is 2021. So 2021 and the beginning of 2022, you all know we've gone through COVID. COVID actually brought two different contexts on the table. Surely for me, on the one hand, it emphasizes the fragility of humanity and also emphasizes the interconnectedness of nations in the globe. But and that probably sort of postulated or pushed or argued for much more solidarity, caring for one another, looking out for one another. But on the other hand, we also saw a level of protectionism, nationalism, and we've seen that in the initial part of vaccine development. And the term that you probably heard about was vaccine nationalism, where people say, well, I'll close boundaries, I'll protect my nation. My nation first and then the rest, if there is something left for the rest. And those are the two poles that we needed to navigate ourselves in. And so that's a debate on its own, and I'm not going to use this forum to talk about that. But what that actually meant is that as a university, we needed to find high-level principles or imperatives to be able to navigate, manage and guide us through COVID-19 and through specifically 2020 and 2021. And we did that. There were three imperatives that the University of the Free State have committed herself to. The one was that the first priority for us was the health, the safety and the well-being of all our staff and our students. And that always have been our number one priority. Everything that we do, everything that we suggest, everything that we plan, that was the basis. The second one was as we navigate our teaching and learning agenda, our research agenda, our engaged scholarship agenda, our operations, and the way that we manage the university, we always ensured that no student or no staff member should be left behind. And we engage different strategies, different practices to deal with each of those two constituencies. On the one hand, you might not have enough devices to have the students, bandwidth, connectivity, how do you deal with that? On the other hand, our staff, excellent staff, very committed staff, but you also needed to protect them from exhaustion, depression, social isolation, and how do you engage with that? So that was for us a second imperative. And the third imperative for us was to complete our academic years 2020 and 2021 successfully. Now, I can tell members of the convocation that we dealt with that successfully. We have gone through 2020 and 2021, we completed our academic years, and in fact, to such an extent that our success rate at undergraduate level have increased. Now, again, once, and that's the role of our Senate as a custodian of our academic project, is to grapple with that result, to say, well, what does it actually mean? And we still need to have a more in-depth discussion on Senate, but what clearly have shown is that it's shown the resilience of students and our students, find different ways to deal with things if there were challenges that came that way. But it also showed the commitment of all of our staff, our academic staff, as well as our support staff, to be able to assist that as a particular outcome. Through COVID-19, we have had lots of learnings. There were lots of things that we mainstreamed out of COVID-19. We've mainstreamed now a blended teaching and learning model. And the blended teaching and learning model, as a residential university, we still, our first priority is still face-to-face. And we do have some programs or modules that are taught online, but we do have a continuum in between of emergency teaching and learning, of a flipped classroom, of open and distance learning, in some faculties, or one particular faculty, we're looking at virtual reality, and then we have online. So it's a whole continuum, and that is going to be the way that we will continue with our teaching and learning agenda. Our focus for now is that blended teaching and learning model is designed and intended to strengthen our face-to-face teaching. It's not to substitute, but that might differ or might change as we continue in the future. I spoke at a conference, a PwC conference earlier this week, and the whole issue that we talked about was about the influence of the metaverse onto our teaching and learning model. Remember, online is great to have online, but you lose the interaction between students. You can't see the students. So you can't have a very interactive environment in the online space for now. But the metaverse will resolve that. So that, to a certain extent, is the next generation of students that are going to enter our universities. So you might enroll at the University of Paris, and you might visit them once a year, but you would feel and you would interact through the metaverse on the campus as if you were there. And that brings a different context to a teaching and learning model. And as practitioners of teaching and learning, we need to be well aware of that development and to engage with that. We have done quite a lot of work in the year under review on student success at the undergraduate level. And I can just say that the academics, together with the Center for Teaching and Learning, that is headed up by Professor Francois Strydom, is using data analytics to understand success better. How do we track students? How do we understand how students develop individually? To such an extent that I can say to members of the convocation, if we're not the leading, we're probably one of the leading universities in South Africa on understanding the drivers of student success. And that was re-emphasized again about a month ago when a very prominent international foundation from the States awarded quite a large grant to the University of the Free State to connect student success with employability using digitalization and the ability to be able to scale it from 200 students to 20,000 students. They only made 2 allocations. They call it transformative grants, one to us on the African continent and one to the University of Texas in Austin. And they operate in America, South Africa, and India. So that emphasized, as I engaged with the executive team, the quality of the work that we are doing and that we are very proud of in leading the higher education sector in South Africa on that part. So for me, the last point on the undergraduate program is that digitization is now embedded in what we do. Student success is quite crucial. We improve our success rate. We need to understand the drivers for that, our blended teaching and learning model. And then what we have done quite a lot, and in fact in student success, it's been packaged under student success, is the support that we provide to our students. We attract quite a lot of first generation students, and we need to support them through various interventions. And that interventions effectively are the interventions that we use as drivers for student success. Whether it's a No Student Hungry program, to the Department of Student Counseling, to the work the Center for Teaching and Learning doing, or to the work that our multilingual academy is doing. When we talk about Sesotho, isiZulu, Afrikaans and English as the key sort of languages that we engage with. Lots of support. But that support now, with this platform, is going to be integrated. So the systems are going to be talking to one another. And we're talking about that digitalization platform. Then, while I'm on teaching and learning, I want to move very briefly to another area, because it actually cuts to teaching and learning, and that is our student funding. Because we've got a lot of first-generation students, we attract students from a large percentage of students that do get NSFAS grants. And you all have read in the paper, if you're in South Africa, about the challenges of NSFAS. This year, we started to try to deal with the challenges at a national level, and also institutional level, but it does put a lot of pressure on the university. I was deputy chair of a ministerial task team that made proposals to the ministry and to cabinet to replace the NSFAS model with a much more sustainable model for student funding, and I hope that the cabinet will approve that, so that could be starting to implementing that part in 2023, and then the larger part in 2024. But for our pro-poor strategies from an institutional level, the funding that we provide as a university is close to 150 million rand for student support, student funding, finance, bursaries, and so on. So it's a large proportion of funding that we, and that's, that's part of our role. We need to make sure that students do come in the university if they are academically eligible to study here. And we need to find ways to be able to support them. So let I just move briefly on to our research, because that's research and internationalization is our second core area. There and here our focus this year, as a continued focus, but talking about this year, was to increase our number of academic staff that have got PhDs. Also yesterday in that talk, I said that if you play soccer or rugby or netball, you have to understand the rules of the game. Otherwise, you're probably going to get a lot of penalties against you. The rule of the game in academia is that you should have a PhD. And that's the basic component, because if you have a PhD, you can not only teach, but you can also start to supervise other students. So when I arrived in 2017, 41% of our staff have had PhDs. We now just above 55%, but there is in the vision that I have, that we're working on, that I'll talk to, there is a target that we want to achieve over the next couple of years. We also have increased our research output, but the important is not only to increase the numbers of research output from our researchers, but to understand where do they publish. Do they publish in quality journals? Do they publish in journals in collaboration potentially with high quality universities in South Africa and abroad? And that I see an upward trend. Postdoctoral Fellows is quite important. They are the people that already have got a PhD and they do another year or 2 or 3 at an institution. And that's normally right up their PhDs, probably more work, but they can also co-supervise to a certain extent. And we need to increase the number. We're in the order of about 150, 160 postdoctoral, which is actually quite good for a university, such as the University of the Free State, but I think we need to be north of 200 on the postdoctoral fellows. We also increase our postgraduate students. And in fact, this morning I was talking to somebody at another university, and their trend was they had a decrease in the number of postgraduate students post-COVID. We actually had an increase. Our master students increased with about 260 additional students, and our doctoral students was close to 60. And so it's an upward trajectory, and we need to see to what extent we could increase that further. So that whole area I'm actually quite proud of. But we also have to look at how do we bring more academics into our system. more researchers, and how do we optimize our existing research capacity. And I can tell you, members of the convocation, that as I said, 41% of the staff in 2017 had PhDs, and I've indicated where they are now. But those are intentionally interventions that we do. But what was also quite concerning in 2017 is that 40% of all staff at the university produce, I'm talking about academic staff, produce 100% of the output. So the question was, what happened with the other 60%? And that we've been working on. So I think it's not only try to increase the capacity with more staff, but also try to be more efficient and more effective. And then as we talk about digitalization at the undergraduate level, we also have a digital scholarship that we have at the postgraduate level. You can call it, for a lack of a better word, e-research. How do we help researchers through digital tools? And in fact, I also participate in a discussion yesterday morning about how higher education is going to look like in the future globally, and the one part was obviously about the geopolitical changes in China in the West and what impact that had on higher education. It actually presents a high level of anti-intellectualism on the table. How does universities respond to that? But the other part is the part of open access, open resources, digital resources. And I think it was about a week ago or 2 weeks ago that the White House announced that any research that are funded by the United States government or through the government has to be in open access platforms immediately. There's no negotiation about that. So that's where the world is going in terms of research, and how do we project the university? And our Digital Scholarship Center is in the research and internationalization area, quite important. And then we also have reimagined a different take on internationalization and how we do that. Now, often when I talk about these things, I think 15 minutes is often very, very short, Mr. President and Director of the proceedings. I'm not going to go into detail in engaged scholarship, because engaged scholarship actually is a response to a very fundamental question to the university. The question that engaged scholarship actually asks, if through your teaching and learning, your education, and your graduates, and your research, you can't make a positive impact on society, then you have to ask the question, why do you exist as a university? And that question that we constantly have to ask ourselves is the question that engaged scholarship is trying to answer. And again, remember, members of the convocation, I did say that the parity between engaged scholarship, research and internationalization, and teaching and learning means that engaged scholarship can't exist in the absence of the other two. But neither should the other two exist in the absence of engaged scholarship. And I can once again talk a lot about the work that we're doing there, but that is where strategic partnerships and alliances in co-creation happens. But I'm not going to elaborate on that. But the other two things that I just wanted to highlight as well is the one is governance, and I'm glad that our registrar is also here, and our deputy registrar is also here. The one area that I personally impressed over the last few years has been the area of governance. And I'm impressed the way that we updated our policies, our remits, our terms of reference, the culture that has been right from council up to the lowest committee, how important governance is. And I think in the context of what's happening in South Africa and what's happening sometimes in other parts of the world, it's for me a beacon, an oasis that I think as an institution, and I would like members of the convocation to feel proud of. That's been tightened, but it's been tightened in a way, and my earlier conversation with the registrar, and he will probably excuse me if I say that, was that I said the role of the registrar is to make sure that we conform, that we comply. But I also said to him that it's important that the rigidity doesn't allow us not to be innovative, not to be creative, and not to be forward-looking. So there is a level of flexibility, but the flexibility never challenged the governance framework, and that's great, and I think we got that right. So I wanted to make that comment because I do think that members of the convocation, and as I said, you are immensely important to the university. You are, for me, the continuity between the past, what we've got here at the present, but also the future. And you have to make sure that these sort of questions are continuously asked. And then our operations, again, our finance department is doing fantastically well. Our infrastructure, if you go on our campuses, and I use campuses, not only the Bloemfontein campus, Kwakwa campus, South campus, it's brownfield and greenfield buildings and projects, and how do we manage our university estate, which is actually quite a lot. It's probably close to about 10 billion rand if you're looking at the current value of the university estate. So that's important. Our digital and physical infrastructure. It's not only physical, you also look at the digital. And then before I just venture the way forward, is that the university, and again, coming back from a COVID-19 where there were not such sort of staff and students on campus, this semester when everybody was back, you can again find the vibrancy of what an academic enterprise is about. It's about debates, professorial inaugural lectures, memorial lectures, public lectures, colloquia. Our landscaping at the university is fantastic. The Red Square, and those that are connected virtually, you wouldn't be able to see, but at some time we will fly a drone over the Red Square. There was some lecturing staff that actually is teaching outside, just to give students an impression. It's been so I look at student life, the vibrancy. We have had a vaccination policy that's been lifted, so members of the public comes in, they jog on campus, they cycle on campus, on our campuses. That is what the university is about. It's not for ourselves, it's for everyone. And we are custodians for that. So we do have debates on corruption, on ethical leadership, on gender-based violence, all of the topical issues. And we bring either virtual or physical to our platforms experts in South Africa and around the globe and on the continent to talk about those issues, to get a better understanding. And that is what we want to do more and more. And again, that's also an invitation to members of our convocation, it doesn't really matter where they sit, is to see how you can get involved, to be able to make this an institution where people would like to come to, but also people are not scared to speak out if we need to speak out on issues that aren't right. So what's happening going forward as the strategy finishes in the end of 2022? We are in the process, probably quite advanced because we're taking that document to council next week on a vision, and we call the vision 130. And the reason why it's 130 is because the vision and the strategy that's going to be linked to it is going to be spanning over 12 years. It's going to take the university to 2034, and by 2034, the University of the Free State is going to be 130 years old. Now, it's going to be hopefully a big party, a celebration. I certainly won't be here by then, but at the university, but something that this institution needs to be proud of and need to be celebrating. But to be able to take us there, the vision is going to be quite bold. The vision is that I talk about PhDs. We want 75% of our staff to have PhDs by then. Probably higher than that, but 75%. We want to have a much more focus on our postgraduate programs. So at the moment, we're probably about 18%, 18% postgraduate to undergraduate. We want to shift it close to about 30%, 28, 30%. We want to be one of the top 5 institutions in the country and one of the top 600 in the world. And we're going to attract through that academics. I talked about diversity earlier, intellectual diversity, diversity that comes through race, gender, intellectual diversity, ability, disability. That diversity is going to help us to strengthen that. We're going to reduce our student numbers from 42,000 to about 35,000 because we believe that's the number that we should be focusing on. And there's a couple of other bold sort of commitments that we're going to make. And I want to ask our alumni, our members of the convocation, to find a place in that Vision 130 where you're already part of 130 because you study at this university, you are associated with this university, but I want you to find a niche in that Vision 130, which we're going to share with you quite widely, to be able to see how you can contribute to make this university an even better institution than what it was when you were here and what it is now. So in closing, Mr. President, I think the university is at a good space, at a good place, and there are always challenges, but we manage those challenges in a way of being constructive, see it as opportunities, and I think you could be very proud on your alma mater. Thank you.
Are there any questions you would like to ask the Vice-Chancellor? Please put up your hand, introduce yourself. There are people with roving microphones that will assist.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Letebele Musala. I graduated here in 1992. So it's exactly 30 years ago. I've got 2 questions. One is related to the number of PhDs. You mentioned that when you arrived, it was about 40-something percent members of the staff with PhDs, and at present you are about I think you said 55. The only question that I would love to ask is why? What is the reason? Why can't we attract more in terms of appointments? I hope it's about appointments, I'm not sure. The second question would be with regards to transformation of the university. I might have not heard you say anything about transformation, but your speech might have said a lot about transformation. But I just want to find out whether are we happy as the community of this university that we have transformed in line with transformation agenda in this country. Thank you, sir.
I think let me answer probably depending on how many questions there's going to be. Let me just ask the question one by one. So the first answer in terms of the PhDs, the increase of the PhDs, but why is it so low? It was at the beginning, it was a combination. The one was the individuals that apply, so that we appointed people that did not have PhDs, but that was in the process of completing their PhDs. But I must just add that when you get into an academic environment and you're still busy with a PhD and you don't have appropriate time allocated to complete it, it can take you forever to complete that. So that was the one, and we needed to talk to the line managers, talk to the HODs, talk to the deans to say that those individuals that apply, those members of staff, we need to free up some time for them to complete that. Then there was a fairly large complement of staff that was already in the system that didn't have a PhD, but they weren't busy with a PhD. So we needed to put some pressure on those staff members to be able to complete. To indicate that if you haven't got a PhD, you would not be appointed at the level of lecturer, or upwards, obviously, up to professor, unless there's a very, very a good motivation why you should be appointed. And I think those are the changes that we brought in, but the why question, that's the reason why. And in fact, the changes was driven by support and interventions that we as an institution designed to be able to take us through. So that's really the why. In terms of transformation, are we happy? I think transformation, for me, there are probably 3 levels of transformation. There's a transformation under the staff. That's more in employment equity. There's transformation under the students, also gender, race, and internationality or nationality. And then there's transformation in terms of the systems, the processes, the policies, the practices. Those are for me the 3 types of transformation. Now in the system side, I think we've gone quite a far way. I think I'm moderately happy there. There's more work that we need to do. And the policies, the systems also need to be transformation, belonging, friendly. So that for me is quite important. Moderately happy. At the student level, I think there if we have to look at transformation in terms of race and gender, we're about 60% female and 40% male under the student cohort. We quite transformed at a student level in terms of the different race groups. I think to a certain extent that we need to be mindful that diversity under the student cohort is for me now more critical than just purely looking at employment equity. And in fact, I addressed this morning about 300 students that are the leaders of the university, residence councils, faculty councils, campus SRCs, and so on. And I talk about diversity from that context. Intellectual diversity, diversity in terms of race, in terms of your demographic groups, but also in terms of nationality. So there I'm happy with the transformation, and I want to move to more diversification in that transformation group. And then at staff, support staff, I'm happy with the level of transformation, academic staff, and of transformation in the academic staff is that we have got a very, very high retention rate at the University of the Free State, probably the highest amongst all the 26 universities. So it's very hard to create vacancies. To provide more academic positions, you have to grow, or people have to retire. As I said, the retention rate is quite high, so not a lot of people resign. To a certain extent, that's great because it provides continuity, but to another extent, it creates some challenges. So that's something that we have to work on. So that part, I'm not really happy. So that's more the employment equity on the students. But if you look at it as a collective, then the collective, for me, where I look at transformation. I've given you the employment equity statistic. It is about institutional culture. Is the institutional culture progressing? And I think I am quite happy the way at which we progressed. Because transformation for me is a journey. It's never a destination. And as long as there, for me, adequate progression on transformation. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope this is a safe space. Prof?
It is a safe space.
Thank you. Dr. Kwabe, I am fortunately a staff member in the institution. So when Prof first speaks, he mentions that the vision of the institution is to be a research-led institution. I have been an associate researcher in this very university for quite some time, and I have graduated a number of master's students, 8 to be exact. This year would make 15 students. But upon joining permanently in November last year, I still don't have any research funding as a startup academic. Now, what I want to ask is, how do you support your young academics, not particularly young, but new academics in the program? And secondly, I want to find out, because you speak about the value proposition of the institution being transformative action. After having engagements with a number of academics, young black academics, they mentioned that they would love to leave the institution. If they get something elsewhere, they're going to leave because of the culture of the institution, number one. And number two, because they are not happy with the salaries that they get here. Now, my question in relation to that is, how do you guys plan to retain your staff? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Kwape. So let me talk about research funding, and remember, research-led is where we want to strive towards. At the executive level, I've indicated that Vision 130 that still encapsulates the vision that I've articulated this morning is going to be very much on the postgraduate and the research arena. So I personally, although I've spent some of my attention on the research side, most of that was at the undergraduate level the last couple of years. And I'm quite happy that the way that we've managed it, the staff, the support is there. I'll provide probably more oversight, and that the for academic and the deans and the HODs know exactly what they need to focus on, and they will obviously introduce needing there as well. So there's probably going to be from the executive side, surely from the Vice Chancellor side, much more intention on the postgraduate and research side. But up until now, we have had a differentiated strategy in research. The differentiation strategy focused on the individual. It focused on groups that have the ability to leverage the funding that we inject, and it also contribute to larger centers. Because we could, and we've got just over close to 1,000 academics, we could give all of them funding, but as I indicated, the productivity of those academics might not be equal, so they might be distributed. So you're gonna lose some of that funding. That's not gonna get any return. So the differentiated approach have been our approach. Now, that differentiated approach has been delegated down to faculty level and to HOD level. Now, I can't talk to individual researchers which one got and which one didn't get, but there is going to be a much more key focus of the strategy. That's already part of the strategy now, but we will need to understand why you, as an individual that has been engaged with research, couldn't access that individual funding. And for me, there are various programs that we have put in place for young and new academics. And again, I don't know which faculty you are in, but we will need to check why you, or if you talk about you specifically, didn't have the opportunity to access some of that funding in terms of start-up for young academics. But the point that I can make here now is that in our new vision, that is going to be expanded. We're going to allocate more funding into that space to be able to look after our new academics and also young academics, besides the programs that we already have for mentoring young academics through our system. We also have got a program called the Transformational Professoriate. There's 73 academics, and a large percentage of those are black academics and females, to be able to transform the professoriate, because we don't have a lot of black and female professors, and we needed to do that. So we got 73 in that system. Around the comment why black academics would like to leave, we keep a very close tab. And when I talk about the high retention rate, that's generally the case. We keep quite a close tab on the exit interviews if there are people that leave, if they all staff members, but particularly black and female. And I said institutional culture has progressed over the last couple of years, and that was my response to the first speaker. But there might be specific pockets or areas in the institution where there could still be challenges. And I actually asked about a month and a half ago to our HR department to zoom into although our retention rate is quite low, I want to know if there are departments that has got much higher retention rates than our average of the institution, and try to understand why that is the case. We do have retention strategies. We to keep academics and also black academics. It's not always the monetary part, as you indicate. It's the institutional part, institutional culture part, and we try to understand what those are. So that's built in our retention strategy. The recognition that you get, and do we give enough recognition? That's part of retention strategy. The open conversation, and I said again, it might not be applied in certain areas, but we would like to understand what those areas are and try to deal with that. So our retention strategy, and again, HR could also share that with you if you want to have more detail, but that's a balance of monetary and other retention interventions that we do. Now, our salaries aren't the highest in the sector. And that's something that we need to look at. As I said, my view, I started the Transformational Professoriate program at the University of Cape Town to also transform the professoriate there when I was Deputy Vice Chancellor. And we lost quite a lot of people after they've been promoted. And my view always at that point to UCT was that, it's not always bad to lose people, because a lot of the feedback that I got, certainly from the HR here and also from the HR there, is that academics left for better opportunities out there, and that stimulate their own growth. So I don't often look at it as negative, but if there are negative things embedded in that, we need to understand that, and then we need to fix that. Thank you.
Good. One more, yes, thank you.
Oh, good morning, everyone. My name is Bafane Day. a PhD graduate from the University of Free State. I would like to understand what is the plan or strategy of the university to increase the postdoc intake. The reason I'm asking this is because I am aware of people in the private sector like myself who would like to pursue postdoc or at least participate in research, but often there is an expectation that you must be at the university full time, and when one considers that, you try and match that with your salary, and it's almost not possible. So I wanted to check if would a blended approach maybe work, where you allow people to continue to do what they do in the private sector, and at the same time maybe spend a month or two at the university towards their postgrad or deepening of their research in what they do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bafana Day. I think that's an excellent question. I did say to you that we have got about 160 postdoctoral fellows at the moment, and a large percent of them are also international. I don't know how many of them are from the private sector, but first of all, there are two strategies that we have agreed on in the postdoctoral fellow space. The one is that I want to see that number increase beyond 200, so that we want to increase more the number of postdoctoral fellows. And I had a discussion with the VC of Johannesburg just before he will be taking up a new position in Japan. But to look at a joint postdoctoral fellowships between UJ and University of the Free State, because I think on the one hand it is to optimize funding, and secondly it's also to give a perspective of two institutions, and that's great. So we're working on that at the moment. The Department for Research Development is focusing on that proposal together with UJ's research department. But I think the one that you mentioned, that we haven't pursued, and I do think that that's a very elegant proposal that you put on the table, is if there are people, colleagues in the private sector, industry and commerce, that want to deepen their knowledge, but logistically it doesn't actually make sense for them to spend a year or two full-time at the university. I think one should explore both models from private sector, but that's something that I think we should definitely pick up. My idea was, that we haven't actually had that up until now, was to also look at joint appointments between the private sector, science councils as well. We've got a couple of science councils and universities. And my view is that ultimately the university sector is a component in your ecosystem of innovation between the private sector, industry, commerce, government, science council sector, and to a certain extent also the TVET college sector. And we need to look at the interchangeability of that more elegantly. But I've made a note, that's one area that I think we should pick up. Thank you.
Yeah, we have one question from our online viewers. This is from Mtandeki Chabalala, and he asks, how do we ensure inclusive and equitable quality education?
Mr. Chabalala, that's a fairly general question. I think the major drivers for equitable quality education is funding, because funding informs your staff capacity, it informs your infrastructure that you can provide, and also inform students that are academically eligible to enter higher education. And at the moment in South Africa, we have got a funding challenge to such an extent that we had at the beginning of this year a shortfall of 10 billion rand for NSFAS, the National Student Financial Aid Scheme. And we needed to find that funding as a sector. As part of the ministerial task team, we made a recommendation September the previous year, last year, to Cabinet. But Cabinet took a little bit longer, and they did fund, they did provide that shortfall. But the challenge with the shortfall is that the funding, although there were new funding that was injected from National Treasury, that new funding they needed to get from other departments, Departments of Health, Department of Infrastructure, or Ministry of Health, Ministry of Infrastructure, Water and Sanitation. And you can imagine that impact the delivery of what they need to do negatively. But that was about 7 billion that was provided from those departments through National Treasury. So they had to cut in their budgets. And the other 3 million needed to come from the Department of Education Training. So where did that 3 million come from? It came from the grant that has to fund universities to operate. So if you don't fix that modality, you're going to have an erosion of the quality or erosion of funding to higher education institution. And that's going to impact your infrastructure, your maintenance of the infrastructure. We talked about salaries earlier. That's even going to have a larger impact on the salaries of academics and support staff at institutions. It's going to impact the way in which quality education could be offered. So the new model, and I hope that Cabinet, the ANC, would have discussed that at the policy conference in July, that Cabinet would accept the new model. I can't elaborate on the new model because it's obviously confidential, but the new model is a much more sustainable approach, and it actually works on the premise that education is both a public good and a private good, and therefore there's a partnership between the individual, probably approximated by their parents or guardians, a proxy or a partnership with government, and a partnership with the private sector, industry and commerce. That's all in the mix, but obviously much more refined. So that would be, Mr. Sabalala, my response. Fix the funding, making sure that we that those are appropriately resourced, and then we would be able to deliver quality and equitable quality and inclusive education for those that qualify to enter our post-schooling education and training sector. Thank you.
Okay, can we have one more question? Please, here in front.
Thank you, President, Prof. General Siama Sebulai. I'd like to commend, firstly, the university's efforts in insourcing the outsourced staff. And on that, I'd just like, maybe if you can just give a brief breakdown of the staff that you are now insourcing and that you plan to insource by, you said 2023, 2024. And then I'd like to speak on the retention of staff as well, because that plays a cardinal role when we look at achieving the vision that you have for 2030. Because when we focus solely on injecting more staff, and then we don't look at where staff are going after having been developed, and we basically run a loss as the university. So I just wanted to emphasize that. I know that you've spoken on it, but I just wanted to say that I believe that we should camp a bit there by staff retention, and then we look at how we better that. And then I don't know if we should also speak on the model, or was the model just being, we were just telling us about your future plans? Because I also had a question on the decrease in the student intake, because you said that you wanted to reduce the number. And I understand that I'm believing that I assume that it would be because of quality, not quantity. But I also have, it's up for debate as well, but maybe we'll argue it later. Yeah, let me just leave it at that, Prof, for now. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so let me look at the insourcing. So the areas that we are insourcing are the areas that are associated with the sports section, looking after sport and sporting grounds. It's called COFSI Sport. We are also in the process of insourcing the cleaning staff, generally across the university. Then there are the staff that's associated with the residences, HRA, Housing and Residence Affairs, and then we we also have in-source staff doing the landscaping around that. What we have decided, the staff that you're not going to in-source is security staff, and the reason for that, and I want to give a little bit of context. So, when I was at the University of at the University of Cape Town as Deputy Vice Chancellor, I drove the insourcing. So, and we were the first university that insourced amongst the 26 universities at that point. I wanted to introduce a different model, but we didn't have time because there was a lot of pressure coming out of Fees Must Fall. And so I understand the context before insourcing, because the unions and the workers and student forum, they all reported to me as DVC at UCT. I did the insourcing itself. It was a quite large team, and I looked at the situation after insourcing. So when I arrived here in 2017, there was pressure for us to insource. I then argue, because insourcing, if you're not planning for that well, at both WITS and UCT, it can add about, in terms of additional recurrent expenditure, close to about 100 million to your salary bill, just like that. Capital costs could be in the order of 90 to 120, depending on how much capital you invested, but that normally would be once-off capital. So if you're not prepared as an institution, you could bankrupt your institution very quickly. Or, and in some of those institutions, they had 0% increases in salaries of the existing staff due to that. So when I arrived here, I knew of the consequences. So I suggested a different model. Because I said, let us understand what is the drivers for insourcing. I said to earlier that the staff members that were insourced was quite happy to be part of the university. As an outsourced worker, you want to be seen as University of the Free State worker, not an outsourced worker for Company X, and that you should be treated with the same value system as your colleague that is employed by the University of the Free State. So it's about the environment in which the staff, the outsourced worker, work, and the value framework that you attach to it. The second one is you want to get a decent wage. Now there are different sectorial wages that is often pegged at the minimum, and if you at least could pay that, or even a little bit more. And the third one is you want to have security of your job. Because if you work for an outsourced company and you got a contract with the University of the Free State for 5 years, and after 5 years, that contract isn't renewed, that company is sitting with a worker, and if they don't find another job that can utilize that same amount of workers, that work is going to be retrenched. So those were the three. And I propose a model that answers those three questions, a different model. And we implement that. We implement that model, and we ran that. But I knew that the staff actually want to be insourced. So it gives us a platform to plan financially, to make it sustainable. The one area that we experienced difficulty was the security area. And not only UCT, other parts as well. When you insource security, they become your staff. They become, so if you got a wildcat strike, if you got any other issues, those staff members, and I'm not generalizing here, but those staff members could be party to that. And it becomes very difficult, even if you call them an essential service, it becomes very difficult. And if you now talk to people at in-source security, that's the major issue. So we decided not to in-source that, but we have make sure that they are equitably resourced and being salaried for the work that they are doing. So that's on the in-source side. The retention, I'm not going to go into detail on retention. I think the point here already said that we've got a retention strategy, retaining people, but I think the point that you made is what happened to those that left the institution. And we do now start to track them to get some feedback. The decrease in student numbers, obviously, if your plant, and I use the plant as infrastructure now, is designed for a certain capacity. You can't, if you've got a laboratory that can take 100 students, you can't have 120, 130 students or 140 students unless you run parallel classes then into that. So first of all, we're looking at the constraint of our plant. Secondly, we have got a qualification that we currently offer, which is higher certificates, and that we're going to phase out. So a large proportion of the numbers that I'm talking about are the numbers associated with higher certificates. They're going to have a big chunk that bring that number from 41,000 close to 40, quite low. And then we're going to look at streamlining. So our Faculty of Education, for instance, and I know that the Dean would support me, but I haven't asked the Dean to say that. But I think the Faculty of Education has just got too many students. And there we have increased the numbers beyond what I think we could handle. It's not that we compromise on the standard, but we put a massive amount of pressure on our current staff. And if our focus is for that staff to be freed up to do more research, because that is our strategy in our Vision 130, one has to look at the numbers. So yeah, so it's the higher certificates, is to streamline faculties to become more manageable in the numbers, and then to make sure that we over time, and that's by 2034 that we're looking for that 35,000, not tomorrow, but that we start to manage us. And I do think that will bring a different profile of the university in terms of our undergraduate to postgraduate, our research, and be able to say that we can produce, not that we're not doing at the moment, but we can improve the quality offering that we are giving to our staff, our students, and that we could also say to staff that you now got more time to also do other things that are important in under the umbrella of the university enterprise. Thank you.
The last question that we take is also one online, and it comes from Sigwadi Segole. The question is, what is the institution's intervention plan regarding the high level of unemployed graduates and postgraduates? How is the institution assisting such graduates?
Right, thank you, Mr. President. So employability is a challenge for South Africa. Our official unemployment rate is about 33.8%. Our unemployment rate under the use is about 63%. But if you're looking at graduate unemployment, it's much lower. So what it actually states that having a degree at higher education institution is actually bringing that your probability for employment is far greater. Now, what does the institution do? So on the one hand, I think government and now talking to government specifically, they can't create employment, but they can create the environment for employment. And I think there need to be a lot of introspection. Our economy actually was quite small before COVID. It actually shrunk during COVID, and is now busy picking up again. If I look at the last quarter statistics, but there need to be much more that need to be done to create an environment for investment, for growth. And small and medium enterprises, you can't have a red tape and regulations that kill that industry, because they are the people that need to provide entrepreneurial activities. How many entrepreneurs could have survived, but they didn't actually jump from stage 1 to stage 2 because they didn't survive the red tape. So there's a lot that government need to do to be able, and as an institution of higher learning, our first point of intervention is to put pressure on government, to talk about that constantly, and to also talk to private sector industry and commerce to put pressure, because they're willing to invest, but they need to make sure that the environment is there. So what are we besides that? Because that's a voice of the University of the Free State to government, either through the University of South Africa or through other mechanisms talking to government. The second part is what is the institution doing? So again, it's a multi-pronged approach. We're trying to make sure that we have built into our academic departments, most of them, industrial advisory boards. There are 45 at the moment in the University of the Free State, advisory boards where representatives from industry provide advice. And the value there is that we make sure that our curriculum, although the curriculum is not supposed to, at the university, supposed to provide graduates that can walk in a job immediately. It's supposed to provide graduates that is adaptable, can think, can be creative, and can move between different sectors. But within that, we also hear what our industrial counterparts saying on these advisory boards. So that's one part, to make our curriculum a little bit more geared towards employability. But the second part is through the industrial advisory boards. We are engaging in our one department of computer science is a good example of that, where we bring colleagues from Microsoft or Google to come and co-teach or provide a module in our formal program. The module is not a credit-bearing module, but it actually helps for these individuals from the sector to engage with our students and to give them expectations or respond to their expectation, but also to make it a little bit more specific what they need to focus on. Then we got a LinkedIn profile system that help to make our graduates, our pre-alumni, more marketable. We have got our career services that focus on career fairs. We didn't have it physical the last, obviously, 2 years, but we have virtual career fairs to try to link. Our whole project that I'm now talking about, that is funded by this international foundation, is to link student success with employability, and there's other interventions that we do there. And then we also build into our program and what we offer the whole issue of entrepreneurship, to say that you don't need to only look for jobs in the formal sector, in a way, a job at a company, but can you start your own business? So we got support either through theoretical support and then coupled with some physical and experiential support to be able to train entrepreneurs as well. And then we as a university have also adopted, I haven't got the number, I don't want to incorrectly quote a number, but adopted a system where we have interns that we're funding, and it might be close to about 200 or so interns or final years, that at least it's not permanent, but it's at least for a period. Also make them, because sometimes people just want to have that first exposure of a sort of a job environment. Try to expose them, and hopefully then that give a little bit more incubative time to be able to look for a job. So those are the intervention at national level and at institutional level. But again, I think it's important that that we continually to take hands with our different sectors to ensure that we increase the employability. And I certainly looking forward to this integrated project that already have started about a month ago, linking student success and employability to yield even better results. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Peterson, for a very, very comprehensive and informative talk. Let's give a hand to Professor Peterson and thank him for that. So, gentlemen and ladies, now I have to present my report to you. Many people have asked us, what have you been doing for the last year or so, 2 years? What is the convocation doing for us, and how can we get involved with the convocation? So allow me briefly to share the following with you. Firstly, let's meet our ExCom. You all now know about me. I'm the president of the convocation. Here to my right, I have Lefu Mokoena, who is the vice president. We have Professor Peterson and the registrar as part of our ExCom. We have one representative from council, which was initially Dr. Ntabeleng Ramile, who resigned from council, and she was replaced by Ms. Itumeleng Pue. We have two representatives from Senate, Professor Marty Smith, who is sitting there in the audience, and Professor Chris Viljoen. And then we have 5 elected members that were elected by the convocation at large. Those were Dr. Peter Bettings, who resigned last year, Mrs. Nokotula Chakane, Ms. Ntombi Nhlapo, who's also in the audience over there, and Mr. Ntakuseni Razvedani. We, at that stage, only had 4 nominations, so we filled them automatically, and there was 1 position vacant. Didn't bother us that much, so we actually have 2 vacancies at the moment, which will be filled soon. The fact that we have 2 vacancies actually creates some continuity for us at ExCom, so that we don't replace ExCom every year or every 4 to 5 years. So now we have a staggered approach that we will follow, so that some people will be available for longer when the next round of elections take place. From our ExCom, where are we represented? On council, I am there as by virtue of my position. I also represent the convocation at the Koffsie Alumni Trust by virtue of the trust deed. Our representative on the institutional multi-stakeholder group that Professor Peterson has alluded to earlier is Ms. Nhlapo. And you may be aware that the university is in the process of revising the statute, and our representative on that committee was Mr. Razvedani. Then we have council members that are elected by convocation. They are not members of ExCom. They are elected by convocation at large. And these are 3 gentlemen, Mr. Mandla Ndlanga Mandla, and Mr. Zama Zikwebela, and Mr. Henry Shimutukweni. Now you'll see that the first 2 gentlemen's positions on council expire at the end of next year, and Mr. Shimutukweni's term only ends in 2024. All of us that are on council are also part of various council committees. Most of us serve on 2 committees already, and that's by serving on the various council and Senate committees, we can also make our voice heard, not necessarily on the behalf of the convocation, because we are there expressing our own views, but obviously something at the back of your mind does make sure that the convocation is served well in those committees. Now, we had when we started our term, we had 2 strategic sessions, and I'll just like to share some of the outcomes of those strategic sessions. The one is a little bit informal. When we got to know each other at our first session, it was determined what kind of personality types we have, or social types, to make sure that we are not always pulling in the same direction or thinking the same. So we had 5 people who are more analytically inclined. 2 people are drivers. One person is very amiable, and one was very expressive or social. So good mix. The analytical people make sure that we stick to our targets and our goals, and that we don't drift away too much. But we don't want too many of them on the team, then we can get bogged down by detail. So at least only 5 of them are typical analytical people. And it's good to understand where the people strengths lie, that you can understand each other quite well. So we determined our core purpose for the convocation, and that is to facilitate the voice, however diverse, of the alumni and academic members of staff, and engaging them in building a strong and reputable University of the Free State. The aim is actually in our constitution. I'd just rephrase some of the issues here as we express it at our strategic sessions. And that is to represent and promote the interests of the university, exercising and maintaining the rights and responsibilities, to take an interest in and engage in matters pertaining to the governance, administration, and academic affairs of the university, ensuring that relevance and making recommendations to management and council. As you already know, we already have the Vice-Chancellor and the Registrar on our committee, so a lot of the stuff that we discuss at our ExCom meetings is automatically known to them. So you don't have to always formally engage on certain issues. The other thing is, I also already mentioned that we are part of various structures, including council. Obviously, we don't want to get involved in the operational issues of the university. That's not our job. The university has their own policies and ways of doing things. And if we meddle too much in that, in those affairs, that could be regarded as obstructive as well. So we want to make sure that we are heard, but we don't meddle too much. So the next point is to foster and communicate a positive image of the university. We are all alumni of the university. Many of us are staff. We want to make sure that the reputation of this university is upheld and is in a good standing. We don't want to be recognized or be part of a university that does not have a good reputation. You are actually the ambassador in your workplace. You are someone who actually can carry the good reputation of a university wherever you go. The next point was to foster a spirit of belonging among members of convocation, and proactively promoting and facilitating engagement in serving our alma mater. And today is one of those events that we try to make sure that our convocation is informed and that you can have an active way of participating. Lastly is to establish and maintain strategic partnerships, internal and external. Again, we have to make sure that we work as part of the strategies of the university, but also to make sure that the strategic goals and the excellence that is promoted, as Professor Peterson has already indicated, is supported. So what is the aspiration of our convocation? Now, it is an academic institution regarded to be amongst the best in reputation and stature, bolstered by a sustainable base of emotionally attached and deeply invested alumni. Now, you may think this is kind of a vision of our convocation, and especially our ExCom. So our endeavours will then be characterised by being dynamic and engaging, advocating relevance, promoting excellence, embracing inclusivity, and enabling and serving our alma mater, as you have already seen in our aims as well. So we have provided or set ourselves a few goals. I'm not going to go into too much detail. You can read it there. And you will now see that some of the goals that we have as Convocation ExCom are already being achieved by what the university is trying to do. I mean, the question was just about how do we make sure that graduates are employed. That is one of our goals. We want to make sure that there is a forum where people's skills, their expertise, abilities are shared. Not that we are a job creation institution or that we want to make sure that you are allowed to share your own skills, your expertise and abilities. Advertise yourself that you are being known. We have platforms like LinkedIn that are available, but we want to make sure that people actually do recognize these. The next thing is the awareness. I've already mentioned some of it. We want to make sure that this university is regarded as one of the best in the country, and Prof. Peterson has already set the goal among the top 5 in the country, among the top 600 in the world. Let's see how we are going to achieve that. We can be negative about it and or skeptical, but it's up to us as convocation members to make sure that we do get there. Also, we want to make sure that the research output is communicated well. The next point is to establish organizational structures of the convocation. Now, that's not strictly our job. We work very well together with institutional advancement, and we have one of the assistant directors of institutional advancement with us, Mrs. Carmenita Redcliffe-Paul, and we work very, very well with them to ensure, because they are looking after the alumni, making sure that the chapters are being established, making sure that at various levels, whether it be faculty or regionally in the country or in the subcontinent, whether residents' interest groups are being established, whether the faculties or departments are involved, all of those are being challenged through them, and to make sure that it is viable. You know, in the past, when we had a very strong alumni association, we used to have a lot of various interest groups and branches and so on. Many of these have to be consolidated to make sure that they are viable, and that's actually their job, but we work well together with them. I already mentioned that we want to be relevant to yourselves and to the society. We want to make sure that dialogue around transformation is ongoing. There have been some questions about it as well. And very, very importantly, we want to make sure that the database of alumni is up to date. The staff, we sort it. If you're employed by the university, all the details are here, especially since you are a convocation member as an academic staff member. But the alumni is still a challenge for us. And we have lost a few alumni along the way. We would like to rekindle our relationships with alumni. One of the ways that we do it, we have these chapters, we invite as broad as possible, and make sure that the people who are there are being inspired to rekindle their relationships with us, making sure that we know where they are and how to contact them. Prof. Peterson has just mentioned about 140,000 convocations members that we have. I suspect there may be more, because a lot of people did not share their information, and some people have chosen in the past to dissociate them with our university. The next goal, and this is very busy, we would like to be a lobbyist for the university in the future. Again, I'm not going to go through all of it. The main thing that I would like to focus on is at point F, and that is establish working groups. Now, that has come through our meetings in the last few months. That is a way for yourselves to become involved in the management and governance in the executive committee. So we have identified 3 working groups that we would like to establish. The one is on governance and institutional matters, the one is on academia, and the other one is on the strategic positioning of the university. So that will be, and you'll just see just now, this is an ongoing and a new goal that we have set ourselves. That will be a way for yourselves to actively participate in in identifying some issues that the convocation needs to work on, and effectively communicate the outcomes of such debates or investigations back to ExCom and eventually back to the University Management and Council. Now, what have we been doing for the last odd years? I've establish a timeline for yourselves. So I was elected, and Lefu was elected on the 1st of February 2020, and you all know COVID started, or the hard lockdown started in March 2020, and it hampered a lot of our activities that we planned so soon. But notwithstanding, we had the 4 ExCom members elected in May 2020. We started our first strategic session in September 2020 among strict COVID regulations. Everybody got together and we shared our initial thoughts and set up our first outcomes. The next session was in March 2021. And then as COVID regulations started to be lifted, we could engage a little more with our alumni, our stakeholders. And the first event that we actually attended was an alumni event in Clarence, and myself and Lefu were there. The next was in 2022, just over a month ago. We attended the launch of the Lesotho chapter for alumni in Maseru. I was there, Lefu was there, Ms. Nhlapo was there, and the Vice-Chancellor also attended. Excellent event that we had. We actually had to turn away some of the people who indicated that they would love to attend our meeting. And it was not our fault, it was because in Lesotho there was still very strict COVID regulations, so we could only accommodate a certain amount of people. In the beginning of August, we also attended the launch of the Namibia chapter of our alumni in Windhoek, where myself, Lefu, and the Vice-Chancellor were present. And then just last weekend, we attended the launch of the Chancellor's Alumni Awards launch, and an Alumni Connect session here in Bloemfontein, here at the Centenary Complex. And this is something that is going to be a highlight on our calendar next year. It's mainly organized by Institutional Advancement. We want to recognize our alumni, our staff members, and already the nominations will soon be available. Please make sure that you recognize either yourselves or get yourselves recognized, or nominate someone in the various categories to make sure that we make sure that our excellent alumni are being awarded and recognized. Just for interest's sake, we already, despite COVID, we had 10 meetings of our ExCom, that's excluding the strategic sessions, from July 2020 until now. So we've been busy. Most of these meetings, almost all of them, were online, and we had a good turnout of, well, almost every time everybody was there. And also we try to make sure that we are present at all our graduation ceremonies. We want to make sure that people know that the president or the vice president of convocation are at the graduation ceremonies, as well as other events that are being organized by the university. So what have we been doing otherwise? We were part of the election process of one of the council members. That was the election of Mr. Shimotukweni. Various steps that had to be followed, and we were a part of that. We made sure that we were present at all the iterations of the revisions of the university statute are being attended, and feedback is given this way or the other. We developed guidelines for co-option on ExCom, because at this stage there's a provision in the Constitution that people may be co-opted, but there were no guidelines. So we made sure that guidelines are now drafted, and that will be implemented should we need people to be co-opted. And then, as I've mentioned, we have been busy with institutional advancement. We invite them to all of our ExCom members as observers, as well as to give feedback on the various issues that we have joint interest in. I'm just mentioning AlumNet there as well. AlumNet is a platform that will help us to engage with our alumni in future. I think, if I'm correct, it will be launched next year, 2023. Also make sure that all your details will be or are correct on Alumnate. There will be a campaign to introduce the process to you all. This will be one of those ways that you will be able to make sure that also yourself and your abilities are being advertised to other people. So what are the ongoing tasks that we are busy with? At the moment, as I've mentioned, there are 2 vacancies on ExCom that will happen as soon as possible. The Convocation's constitution will probably need to be revised to bring it in line with the new statute or the revised statute. There are some issues that may clash, and we will have to go through that. Obviously, alumni relations is foremost for us because that's the way most of our convocation members are alumni. So we have to make sure that our relations are very well. I've mentioned that we would like to establish those working committees or working groups as soon as possible. And something that we have thought of that we can plow back some of our information, our experience, is to help in the training of the newly elected students representative councils. Many of you have been on SRCs before, and that will also be a way for yourselves to share your experiences, to ensure that the pitfalls are not being treaded in again, to make sure that people understand what are the importance of leadership on campus, that you are not just a voice of some other institution or some other organization on campus, but that you actually have a constitutional base on our campuses. And lastly, we would like to have a museum established for the University of the Free State. As Prof. Peterson has mentioned already, this university is already 118 years old. And, well, nobody from the very beginning is still alive, but a lot of things that have happened in the past are not documented very well. So what we envisage with this museum is that it should not be a static museum. It should be a museum that is alive. It must be dynamic. It must be representing the change at the university as well, so that people can experience what was there in the past, how did it change, and how did it positively affect the university's culture at this stage. So at this stage, we are still in talks with management about this. It's very early stages. So hopefully, I would have liked by 2024, when the university is 120 years old, that this museum should already be here. Let's see. Maybe it will happen. But as I say, it's early days. And hopefully you all will be able to contribute to such museum. As I say, not a static thing, not just an exhibit of artifacts and so on. It must be a live museum. And it should also encompass all 3 campuses. So maybe we will have contributions from the Kwakwa campus, the South campus, and the Bloemfontein campus in the same building. If the opportunities arise to have branch museums at the other campuses, that is something that we can look out for in the future. So as one of my last slides is I would like to give a word of thanks firstly to my ExCom members. Thank you for your support. Without yourselves, we cannot do what we have envisaged to do. From the Registrar's Office, Mrs. van Pletsen and Ms. Naidu, thank you very much for all your efforts. If it wasn't for Mrs. van Pletsen, she is the Deputy Registrar Governance. She makes sure that everything is run very, very well and very smoothly and on time as far as possible. And she's been bugging me for my slides for a while. There were some challenges getting all these slides together. From Institutional Advancement Office, Dr. Russell Alley, the Director, the Senior Director, Ms. Redcliffe, Ms. Sharon Molokwane, Ms. Mafisa Mafareka, and Ms. Klaas. Thank you very much. I didn't know about you before the slides, but thank you very much for all your efforts. From Marketing and Communication, Ms. Lasia Lauder, all the advertisements that were sent out and the communication regarding this meeting, thank you for your efforts. And then lastly, but at least not least, is I would like to thank Ms. Almada Kemp. She's not an alumnus of this university. but she's almost like an alumnus. She knows everybody almost on campus. She's part of the Institutional Advancement Office. She's been there in front helping you to register, designing our advertisements, etc. So very, very, very big word of thanks to you. And lastly, that is the official email address of the convocation. So if there are any things that you can think of that you would like convocation to get part or to be part of or to get involved with, please send us an email. We cannot know everything on campus. We cannot know anything or everything in society where our alumni are. If you think that you need a chapter established in the Northern Cape, please send something to us. Please make a motivation. We would love to discuss your suggestions at our ExCom and take it further down the structures of the university. Thank you very much. If there are any questions, please. I hope you feel that Convocation ExCom is doing something for you and that we're not just static. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I am sorry that I did not stand the first time I asked my questions. President, just one question. Is there a way in which, as Convocation, we can influence and make sure that as part of the 130th history of this university, a Black African VC is appointed in this institution? That's just my question. Thank you.
Thank you. I suppose the process will have to run by itself, but I mean your concern and your suggestion is welcome.
President, thank you very much. From my side, I'd just like to find out what really, as the convocation, generally are we doing to mostly attract your even immediate graduates that fall part of basically the alumni and convocation, because generally I've realized also myself as a recent graduate of the university that we don't really know what the convocation is and what exactly it does. How do some even think you need some form of membership or whatever process that you need to follow in order to form part of the convocation, only for them to later realize that by virtue of you being a graduate, or an alumni, you form part of the convocation. Is there any strategies or groundwork that there is to implement? So, because I even think, even from undergraduate, you don't even know what the convocation is. And you are via an email, when you get an invitation, only then maybe if you engage with the email and read properly that you realize that I'm actually being invited. But prior to that, there isn't really something that reminds you or tells you that upon your graduation or whatever, once you reach the stage, you've now formed part of, and as a result, when you get invited, even if, for example, there are branches elsewhere, they can even gather there, not necessarily to say they need to gather here. Is there anything that we're really doing about that? Because others even think there's an age group to it, to say maybe once you're 25 or 30 above, I form part of convocation. So there's not really much awareness as to that, even during your undergrad years, and even those now who are graduated and in the workplace, because I know quite a few that are very, like, how can I put it, they're very out there about the university, and I don't think they're getting much platform, and I think this is the platform for them. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yes, as you are correct. On the one hand, at every graduation ceremony, there is mention made of, and especially if Prof. Peterson is on stage, he will make an effort to make sure that you are aware that you are now part of the convocation. But it does fall through. I mean, there are staff members at this university who still don't know that they are members of the convocation. So, on the one hand, we try to make sure that the marketing is being adjusted. And we have had some discussions with, especially with Ms. Lauder's department, to make sure that the marketing is effective. And with institutional advancement, they also try to make sure that you are aware of it. But again, if your details are not on the system, and usually the details are being captured just after graduation, goes into the alumni database, but people's email addresses change, their cell numbers change. So you have to make sure that your details are also correct. That said, with the establishments of the various chapters, and as I say, we've already started, the Bloemfontein chapter will eventually be established. We envisage a chapter in the Western Cape and in Gauteng, and then as the demand or the opportunities arise, there will be more across the country. And I don't want to go back to the past. I mean, although the past alumni branches were effective, we had virtually a branch in every town. In fact, when the University of the old Orange Free State merged with the University of the North and with Vista, we actually had in some instances 2 to 3 branches per city. For instance, in Polokwane, at one stage there was a Pietersburg branch and a Polokwane branch. And at that stage, we had efforts to make sure that these branches merge and form one branch to make sure that we effectively communicate with our alumni. But the problem was there was an institutional culture difference. Some people did come from the University of the North. They were not Kofsies at that stage. So many of these branches eventually fell flat. And there was another reason for that, but I'm not going to go into that now. When we do have branches and launches and events in different locations, the awareness again must be made, and we would like to request from your side also to make sure that your friends, your colleagues are informed as well. That's the only way, it's by word of mouth. We have, and one of the strategies that we have looked at for this meeting is how effective is newspaper advertisement still? Strictly speaking, we still had to advertise in newspapers, and we did, but it costs a lot of money. And if people don't read the Sunday newspapers anymore, or they don't read the local newspapers, then that's wasted expense, and it's not as effective. So we have to make sure that we are effective. And after this meeting, we are going to ask all of you, how did you come about knowing about this meeting? And how would you like us to communicate, and institutional advancement to communicate with you? We must make sure that we don't waste energy and effort on campaigns that don't give us results. So noted, thank you very much. I think they also take note. Let me make sure that in future people know that they are automatically members of Convocation by virtue of being an alumnus, by virtue of obtaining a degree or a diploma at this university, that you don't need to pay membership fees, that you don't need to apply, you are automatically. Obviously, there is this thing of association and disassociation. So people who don't want to have anything to do with the university afterwards, that is their choice. We can't stop that. And we have had some people who say, please don't contact me anymore. Please take me off your database. That is also their choice. Thank you. Further questions? Okay, thank you very much. I would like now the Vice President to give us a few words of thanks before we close.
Dumelang, le tswile, re phetse, Okay, thank you very much, President, Vice Chancellor, Professor Francis Peterson, Register Ntate Nikilen Sababa, Deputy Register, Me Elna, and all eminent people gathered here today. I'm a very shy guy, but I will try not to be shy. Reflecting on the state of the university, as Prof has alluded, we have listened attentively about the core mandate of the university, as we are celebrating 118 years this year, with a total number of 42,000 students in our 3 campuses, but with singular one voice. With plus or minus 5,000 staff, we are still driven by the vision to be research-led, student-centered, and regionally engaged so that we continue to be the leading edge of the Global South. Our focus will continue to be on social justice development, values that are globally competitive for our graduates. The Prof also touched on the framework of guidance for the 5 areas encapsulated. He talked about the integrated transformation plan that is equal to social justice. He went further to talk about the strategy from 2018 to 2022, of which is to enhance the scope of transformation, and alluded further on the 3 types of transformation, and also talked about the high performance the institution envisaged. Also talked about the University Risk Committee. He talked about institutional culture, whereby multi-stakeholders group will belong, and the belonging culture within our university. He went further to talk about the review years of 2021 to 2022, where COVID showed all of us how fragile we are and how interconnectedness we can be as the nations, and what is important is solidarity moving forward on the 21st century. He went further to talk about the safety as the priority for all the staff in the university. He went further to talk about the blended learning model, of which is taking us into the digital economy. We went further to say this blended learning model is designed to strengthen our face-to-face learning, but not to omit it out. He went further to talk about the challenges that NSFAS is facing and the new models to replace NSFAS that have been submitted to the cabinet for 2023 to 2024. He talked about the funding the university gives to those students who come from historical disadvantaged backgrounds but showing academic excellence of plus or minus 150 million. He went further to say we are research international area in academic and staff with 55% PhDs, and even our masters and PhD students are having an upward trajectory. He went further to talk about the vaccination policy that has been uplifted. He also talked about the most important one, Vision 130, of which over 12 years from now will be in 2034. But as we talk about Vision 130, what comes to the mind is to thank Ntate Swart posthumously, is to thank Tinias Stein posthumously, of which are the founders of this university from 1904. Because we stand tall like this, because of these giants, we've been standing on their shoulders. That is why our institution is still seen today globally. And then he talked about in Vision 130 that we must have 75% of staff with PhD. No mountain is too high to be climbed. We can achieve that, even more than that. He talked about our institution being on the top 5 in the country, meaning excellence should always compel our actions and thoughts. He went further to talk about intellectual diversity, and he also went further to talk about all of us contributing to make COFSI a good space and a good place. With that, Prof, we thank you, and we are blessed to have human soul like you leading our ship of UFS, not as a Titanic, but going straight to the shores of prosperity. Thank you, Prof. Coming to the report of the President, Dr. Peterson, Detroit. We call him our captain. We call him our captain. We call him our captain. Our president alluded that we started with the strategic sessions where we started to learn one another so that our puzzle of ESCOM can be together. Then he went further to explain to the House about our core purpose and our aim, of which is to foster the good image for our university. He went further to explain that our main mandate is to establish strategic partnerships as we aspire for the goals to ensure that our graduates are employable and can be taken by top-tier companies globally because of their skills. Because when we were in the University of the Free State back then, we used to call it UFS, University of Frustration and Stress. But nowadays we call it University of Fun and Success. We should ensure visibility of UFS at all level costs. He went further to say there are still some vacancies in the executive committee. He talked about the clearance alumni with institutional advancement, where we were trying to establish the Eastern Free State chapter, but it's still loading. And then we went to Lesotho. There was a success of Lesotho chapter, whereby the talks of the prof there, when he gave his report, it led many students to want to come to South Africa, at the Bailey, Central South Africa. The Namibia Outreach program, it was also a success in Windhoek, whereby we find out that majority of the people in Namibia, they only think about University of Cape Town, Stellenbosch. They don't know that in Central South Africa, there's a COFSI that knows a feeling. And majority there, they want themselves home now. And then we talk about the working groups, of which Ntakuseni, Razivani, Ntombi Nshapo, and Nokutula Chakani, they are heading them of governance, academia, and strategic positioning, although we are still waiting for the terms of reference so that we can move forward with a modus operandi. And then he also gave us the timeline and also talked about the ESCOM participation in various activities. On ongoing tasks, he also talked about us having a mandate to review the constitution of the convocation. And we also, as a collective leadership, will take an initiative to meet with employed because they are having criminal records while they were still students, while other outside influences that makes them to do things that are wrong. Because we do believe in an open policy as the University of the Free State that if problems appear because the solutions are there. So we need to sit down as the thinkers and come up with solutions to each and every problem, but not to allow our students to destroy our property. It's taking us backward, whereas we still need some more fundings. So we'll engage on that as the next project, as the President has alluded. And the working groups will also work. And then we are having the UFS Museum. And then the UFS Museum will connect us with the past, the present to the future. We'll ensure that there's no history that will be erased. We are in the digital times. We need to tell our children where we come from, because a tree without roots is dead. Let me thank Meloda for ensuring that people know about this meeting of today. But before going there, I would like to say the President has given us the email of the convocation and kindly distribute it via your WhatsApps to your friends through social media. Thank you very much. I'll also take this opportunity to thank the marketing and communication staff and personnel for ensuring everything is a success today. Can we give them a rapturous round of applause? Also, the family in the advancement, institutional advancements, represented today by Kamenita, Sharon in absentia, Mema Fisa, and Dr. Ali. Can we give them a round of applause again? The Register's Office. Every time when we have problems in terms of policy and governance issues, they are always at hand to assist us. Me Elma, the Registrant Ateniki Lensababa, Me UN Naidu Realeboa. Can we give them a round of applause? And last but not least, we should thank also the IT personnel that ensure that the people online can be able to be part and parcel of us. Siyabonga, can we give them a round of applause? And since when we are on the eve of September 11, that happened on 2001, we must thank the protection services in the university that we are safe to sit here. Can we give them a round of applause? And lastly, but not least, the Benjamins, the cafeteria, the catering, the people behind it. We thank you very much. Can we give them a round of applause too? And last but not least, give yourself a round of applause. You've been good to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Lefu, for your entertaining words of thanks. We appreciate that. It's always the Lefu trying to make sure that we don't go back to the university of frustration and stress. So always a light heart as well. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attendance. We appreciate it a lot that you made an effort to come here. Some of you came from very far. Please, next time that we advertise this meeting, we will make sure that it will be more. There will be more effort, and please, from your sides, please encourage your friends, your fellow colleagues to attend next time. We initially thought that this venue is going to be full, because just after the first notices went out, the reaction spiked actually quite a lot. So we started making plans to make sure that there are even seating in the gallery as well. So next time, please join us online, join us here in the venue. And by that, I'm closing this meeting. Thank you very much. There will be some refreshments outside for yourselves. Thank you.